start the record.
I can hear myself talk, which is really annoying. But.
Yeah, there's a bit of an echo. Probably. Yeah, if you can pick up a mic for $10, $20 at Radio Shack or any of those stores, Best Buy, and just plug it in and it'll work. I use a little standalone mic that sits on a little tripod kind of on my desk so that the microphone is closer to my face. But I hear that the best you can use is the headset mic. In other words, if you get one of those headsets where the speakers and the microphone are on that same thing and you just plug it in and wear those while you're having a session. Okay. All right. So here's how it works. I can write equations that we can, in other words, whatever problems we're going to do, I'll write them on my drawing tablet, and then I'll ask you to help me solve them. Okay? All right. So, do you have any stuff in particular you wanted to work with today, or you want me to just continue kind of where we left off the other day?
Just continue.
Okay. I'll kind of use my own little curriculum on what I think you'll be faced with when you get to algebra next year.
Okay.
Like I said, I'm kind of making it up, but it's the basic stuff of algebra. I mean, I'm using these books as a go-by, but let's talk about orders of operation.
Okay.
You've learned Pemdas, no doubt?
Yes.
Okay, and you know what each of those letters means?
Yeah.
Okay, so if I had the expression, all of a sudden my pen stopped working. Hold on. Ooh, wow. Let me close that out. Open up another one. Make sure I can write. Yeah. Okay. So if I had this expression, now I'll use X. There's no reason to confuse you with other letters if not required. What's that equal to?
No, you first have to do the X minus 3.
Well, what you want to do is remove the parentheses. In other words, when they talk about PEMDAS, the P is for parentheses.
Yeah. Parentheses, exponents, division.
Right. So, okay, let's make it even more complicated. Let's put that in there. Okay? Now, it doesn't really have to be PEMDAS. You can reverse the P and the E, and it's frequently correct to do so. Okay? In other words, the first thing you would do here would be to square the 3.
Yeah.
Okay? So, I'm actually going to do the E first, and I'm going to replace that with a 9. Now, next we want to remove the parentheses. Well, how do we do that? What's the expression if I remove the parentheses?
Minus X.
4 minus X, and what about the minus 9?
Don't you just do that?
No. This negative sign has to be distributed to everything that's inside the parentheses. Okay? So I'm going to distribute it to the X, and that makes minus X. But then when I distribute it to the minus 9, it turns plus. So that's the result. In other words, parentheses do make a difference, a huge difference. That expression with the parentheses is much different than if I don't have those parentheses. Okay?
Yeah.
And it's similar to are those the same? Hello?
No.
Okay, what's the first one equal to?
4X? No.
Yeah. No, you're correct. This 2,
that was correct. Okay.
This 2 applies to everything inside the parentheses. So I have to square the 2 and the x. So 2 squared would be 4, and x squared would be that. Okay? Whereas the bottom is just equal to 2x squared. In other words, this 2 does not affect this 2 because there was no parentheses around it.
Okay.
Okay? So let's go on. Let me see if I can find some. All right. Let's make sure that you don't have any problem doing direct substitution. How would I evaluate this expression if b is equal to -3?
First, you change to b squared.
Well, the first step really is just to substitute. Direct substitution, but always use parentheses. Okay? In other words, when I get to the b squared, well, instead of b, I'm going to put a -3, but I'm going to put it in parentheses. And that's what's going to be squared. Okay? And then I'm subtracting another b. So, in other words, I really recommend you do every single step here. You do not try to do any 2 steps at the same time. It just leads to errors. Okay? Now let's reduce this. What's the next thing?
You change the -3 squared to 9.
Okay, so it's 3 times 9, or I could put the 9 in, I can put the 9 in parentheses to indicate multiplication. Okay, so parentheses do a couple of things. I don't want to just put 3, 9 without something. In other words, this indicated multiplication, this was multiplication, but if I don't keep the parentheses, it's not multiplication unless I replace it with, you know, a dot or something like that. And then what's the next thing?
Plus 3.
Okay. So we end up with 27 plus 3, or 30. All right. If I'm a little too basic for you at this point, give me a little bit, and I'll know what you know and what you don't know. And okay. So, and I may be a little too advanced, and that might happen, but that's not going to hurt you. If I get more advanced than you are, that's just going to prepare you for algebra better. But I don't want to waste your time doing stuff that you know how to do. So how am I going to evaluate this expression when x and y are equal to those 2 things? So tell me what I should write.
Do you know that x is -2?
Yeah, x is -2 and y is 2, positive 2.
2, yeah.
So how am I going to evaluate it? The way this works best is if you verbalize your answer and I write it exactly as you verbalize it. That's actually really good practice for you. It's not something you get a lot of practice at in school, I would imagine. But online tutoring, you are going to get practice at it, and it's going to be helpful. In other words, here's what you want to say. Parentheses -2, end parentheses, squared. Or you could say the quantity -2 squared. Okay, what's the rest of it?
-2 times 2 with the parentheses on the other 2.
Okay, so let's not ignore this plus sign for the moment. Let's write it. That doesn't change anything. And I'm going to put the -2. That's for x. This is for y. And then plus 2 squared. Okay, now let's simplify. In other words, this is always a step you want to do. Don't ever pass this step and try to do it all at once. Even if you can, it's just asking for, to get the negative sign lost or something like that. So what's this thing become?
4.
Okay, and now I can lose that parentheses. I don't need it anymore. What's the next term? What's this become?
-4.
And finally, what does that become?
4.
Plus 4. Okay. All right. I feel this is a little too easy for you.
A little bit, yeah.
Okay. Here's something a little tougher. Here's what we're told. B plus C equals 7. So what is the value of A? Have you learned factoring?
No. Well, no, yes, I did.
Okay, well, the first step here is to factor. What's the greatest common factor in that expression?
A.
Okay, cool. So that means we can do a lot of stuff. In other words, if you've gotten into greatest common factor, that's a big thing to know and understand. So if I factor out an A, what's left over?
A B.
When you factor a greatest common factor out, always make sure that what's left over, when you put it back together again, you get what you started with. Well, we started with that. Is what I wrote the same thing?
No.
Yeah, it is. In other words, I'm going to distribute the A to the B and then again to the C. So when you're factoring out a greatest common factor, and you were correct, it's A, but what's left over is what you get when you divide each term by that A. In other words, that's what I'm really doing when I factor out the A, is I'm dividing each term. Well, when I divide that term, I get B. When I divide that term, I get plus C. Okay? So this is just a mental check, but it's a very valuable one. You will not mess up factoring at all if you always do this check. Don't just factor and go from there. Make sure that you haven't changed anything. The whole key with algebra is not to change anything from line to line. Well, now we know that B plus C is equal to 7, and we know all of this is 21. So what's the next step? If B plus...
Subtract 7 from 21.
No, if B plus C is equal to 7, then how can I solve that for A? Well, first of all, substitute. Okay, so we have A times, well, instead of B plus C, I'm going to write 7 equals 21. Okay, now, when you get an equation down to just one variable and nothing but numbers, you can always solve it, no matter how complicated it is. If it only has one variable in it, you can solve it. Well, A times 7 is the same as 7A. Now, what's the final step?
Just divide 7 by 21 and 3.
Divide both sides by 7. That's the way you want to verbally express it. Is you want to divide both sides by 7. Why? Because the 7 is currently multiplying. So I want to do the opposite. And now the 7's cancel, leaving me with what I'm looking for. A equals 3. All right. Let's talk about greatest common factor. That's such a big skill that let's practice. Make sure you know how to do them good. What can I factor out of that expression? What's the greatest common factor? There's a number that can be factored. Let's go back to this. What's the greatest common factor?
8.
Remember that it has to divide into both terms evenly. If I divide that term by 8, there you go. It's 2. Okay, so 2 times what?
3.
3 plus 4. In other words, that's the same expression. 2 times 3 plus 4 is the same as 6 plus 8. Okay, now let's go back. Add that variable. Now what's the greatest common factor?
2.
2x.
X. Okay.
Right? In other words, if I divide that by 2x, I get 3. If I divide that by 2x, I get 4. So what you need for something to be the greatest common factor is that it produce a whole number, not a fraction. That's why 8 is not the greatest common factor, because you cannot divide 6 by 8 evenly. So 2x is what comes out as the greatest common factor. What's left over?
3 plus 4.
You got it. And then, of course, that becomes 7 times 2x is 14x. Okay. Let's make it a little harder still. What's the greatest common factor here?
X.
What's left over?
X. So X.
Okay, let's go through the steps so we don't. X is the greatest common factor, which means I'm going to divide both terms by it. Well, what's this? That's x. What's this?
X squared.
Anything divided by itself is 1.
1. Okay.
Okay? In other words, I have x divided by x. It doesn't matter if it's y divided by y, or 7 divided by 7, or 19 divided by 19. Anything divided by itself is 1. So this becomes x plus 1. And now we check to make sure that we didn't change it. When I redistribute this, I get x squared plus x, which is what I started with. Okay. Now, why is it so important? Why is finding a greatest common factor so important? What if I had this equation right here? X squared plus x equals 0. And I said, solve that equation. Well, when you add two numbers together and get 0, you can't really figure out what either one of them are. Right? I mean, I could be adding 5 plus a negative 5 and getting 0. Or I could have 7 plus a negative 7 and be getting 0. So just having two numbers added together getting 0 doesn't solve. However, if you get two numbers multiplying together that are equal to 0, one of them has to be 0. You cannot multiply two numbers together and get 0 unless one of them is 0. For that matter, you can't multiply 10 numbers together and get 0 without one of them having to be 0. There's no way to multiply numbers, get 0, and not have one of them be 0. So when I get to this step, this is one of the most important things in algebra, which is that I've got the product of two things equaling 0. That means I'm going to allow x to either equal 0, this thing, or I'm going to allow x plus 1 to equal 0. And when I allow x plus 1 to equal 0, that gives me a solution of x equals minus 1. So I really have two solutions to this problem, 0 and minus 1. And if we go back and we look at the problem, well, when I put 0 in, I get 0 squared, which is 0, plus 0. So that works. But when I put minus 1 in, notice that that also works. minus 1 squared plus a minus 1 does indeed equal 0 because that's equal to plus 1. So then I have plus 1 minus 1 equaling 0.
Okay.
Okay. So that's greatest common factor, and that's the reason we do it. Now, sometimes you can't take out a greatest common factor. I realize I'm 5 minutes over here, but we got started a little bit late. So I'm trying to give you a full half-hour session. But I can only go for... We can end it here if you're fine with this.
Sure.
Now, let me get an email address. It doesn't have to be yours. It can be your dad's. In fact, he may want to look at these. You may want to review it just to see how you're doing. Hold on. I'm trying to get my pencil working. Give me an email address. Go ahead. Like I said, you can give me yours or your dad's, either one.
My dad's not here, and I don't know his email address.
Do you have yours?
Yeah.
What's yours?
JN060515.
And Jenna is Jenna?
Yeah.
Jenna what?
859.
Okay.
@gmail.com.
Okay. This should be done processing by this afternoon. I record it and then I have to process it. And then I send you a link as to how to see it. That's the way it works. Okay? So I will do that, and I will plan on talking to you Monday at the same time. Now, the next time I won't call you. I will merely text you. Now, will you have a phone? Will you have a microphone on that? I mean, I may have to call you like we're doing now. This works fine for me. If it works fine, I know you said it was a little annoying having that echo, which you could probably eliminate if you got yourself a microphone or a headset. And like I said, they're both very cheap to get. But if this works fine for you, then we can do it this way. Even if we're going to do it this way, I'm going to text you the meeting ID number because you still have to log in to GoToMeeting or join GoToMeeting. And so I won't call you, but that computer you're on should have, if you look at the desktop right now, you should have an icon that's a GoToMeeting icon. It looks something like this up here that I'm pointing to. See that GoToMeeting icon?
Yeah.
Do you have one of those on the desktop of your computer?
Yeah.
Okay. So when you get the meeting ID number texted to you Monday morning, just double-click on that. You don't have to go back to that website. You just have to double-click on that icon and input that meeting ID number, and then you'll be connected and looking at my screen. And then I'll call you like I've done today. And if you've gotten a microphone by then, we don't need to use this method, but it might work fine for you. So, okay?
Okay.
All right, Jenna. I will talk to you at 9:30 on Monday.
Okay. Thank you.
Bye-bye.